I think I know why the tariffs that we've been putting on other countries are so popular to our president. And after you think about it, it's a bit scary. This is Elder Adrian Heyman and I just want to talk about what the president had been promising and is now here, but understanding the real why actually he did what he did. And once you think about it, it's kind of unsettling because it doesn't care about what happens to the people. It cares about what happens in his pocketbook, so to speak. Maybe not his, but the country's. The idea of a tariff, as I stated in another session way in the past, is essentially you put a tax on imports. However, the company of the other country that is shipping these imports, they're not paying the tariffs. And we have to make sure that we know this and make sure no matter what happens, we have to make sure that we know. The Bible says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And we must have knowledge of what things are going forth so we can actually vote on them with at least some mind of understanding what's going on. But a tariff is placed on an import. The import tax or tariff is then paid for by the company that's importing the product. And if that doesn't matter whether it's 10, 50, 100, 500%, it's the company who is purchasing the product from the other country that is being charged the tariff. Now, a company has two ways of dealing with this. One is to eat the tariffs themselves, but in a capitalist society, they are loath to do that because it eats into their profits. For some, it's even a matter of survival. Maybe they're already on a thin margin, and that will put them over their margin. Now, the other way is to pass on the cost to the next person, maybe the distributor, maybe the consumer. And as the distributor, just know that the distributor will probably pass on the cost to the consumer. Now, the tariffs didn't hit all at once in terms of its effect, but they're starting to hit now. You see it in higher grocery prices. You see it in higher car prices. You see it in a whole range of products. And people will say to the president, I told you so, I told you so. But I'm beginning to understand something quite different. Oh, let me go back to what tariffs are useful for before I go into that portion. Tariffs are useful if a country wants to block another country's product because their own similar product is being overran by the product that they are importing. So in order to save that particular industry or sector of the economy, they will put the tariffs at a position whereas the price of the tariff discourages the consumer from buying those products and then buying similar products from domestic sources, which is a good thing for the domestic. In fact, many countries do that. However, this does not mean that industries that have went overseas will now come back just because of the tariff. Because you have to understand this too. Yes, people can go ahead and revitalize factories and start up manufacturing processes. But number one, it takes time. It takes time to get the process up going, to get the material that's needed, and sometimes the materials have been pushed up by tariffs too. So it may not even be worth it to start the whole thing anyway. But let's say that they do. They start the industry up again. Now you got to go and search for workers. And you may think that, oh, this country is starving for workers. Starving is just starving for workers. It has to be, of course, those workers that can do the job that you want them to do. Now, if it's just boxing and if it's shipping and stuff like that, yeah, you can probably find some. But if it's manufacturing certain things that need a certain skill, you may not find it. So it's more to a tariff causing industry to start up. I'm not trying to discourage, but I'm telling you the things that would possibly cause one to think twice about restarting an industry. But that's if the purpose of the tariff was to protect industries here, or start up industries that would say, okay, now you're incubated, go ahead and start it. But the more I look at it, the more I realize that's not the reason why our president was so gung-ho about tariffs, and still is gung-ho. See, in our past, our revenues, United States revenues, the majority of them used to come in through tariffs. Because at that point, there was no income tax. No income tax. So the country raised up tariffs and brought in a lot of money. The problem was the workers who are in home industries that were being demolished, they did not like being laid off or being dismissed, and had lots of strikes during that time as well. They didn't tell you about that. Lots of strikes, lots of civil unrest because of the ease of, because of essentially there just wasn't really enough industry coming in, and they were really pushing down the wages. Well, if you push down the wages, then we won't have to ship it overseas. If we don't have to ship it overseas, then of course, then you have a job. But then the jobs that you have are very, very low wage. We laugh at those. Remember, we were laughing at those who are making the minimum wages of maybe $1 or less, places like China and India and so on. But now they're the ones that have the industries. We don't. But again, that's not the reason why the tariffs are raised. And again, this could be my own reason, and that's it. I believe the reason why tariffs are being placed on all these countries, all these products, is for one thing and one thing only: to boost income of the government. They don't want to raise taxes, especially on those who are captains of manufacturing, who are possibly those that are well off. That's why the tax rate in the top tier has been chopped. But in order to make up for that potential money, of course, there's been cuts to services, and people on both sides of the aisle will agree that's where the cuts were made, mainly because some things didn't follow certain protocols. Now, you can argue about the protocols. Some were DEI, so they didn't want that. Some were by affirmative action. They weren't supposed to do that. Some were because essentially it employed lots of immigrants. Well, no, he didn't want that either. And some were essentially because of they just felt it wasn't very useful for their purposes. So they cut. And so as you're cutting expenses, of course you want to be able to boost revenue. And so our president hit upon a sure way of increasing revenue. That is, of course, if these people still import. And so our president has put imports on pretty much most countries. The ones who are great are the ones that have the 10%, 15% tariffs, when they used to only have 2.5%, if that. So he's made tariffs a major source of income. The question becomes, at what cost to our own people? I'll give you just a small example, but take this and multiply it for all these different products. American farmers used to, or still do, grow soybean. Now, how many people around here eat soybean? So they weren't really growing the soybean for the American public. They were growing soybean for places like USA that couldn't afford the more common forms of agriculture. And soybean is actually a product that's rich in various minerals and vitamins and so on. So it's not a bad thing at all. In fact, it helps save lives. If you drink soy milk, that comes from soybean. Anything that you're dealing with soy, you are essentially getting something from a soybean. Not only that, the U.S. was shipping a large amounts of this product to China. And Chinese were eating it. But in the tariff wars, remember, in tariff wars, two can play that game, not just one. So Trump put tariffs on China, China put tariffs on us. And so now, the companies that in China that would normally buy, they're not buying those soybeans anymore. They're going to other places like Brazil and other people that are just too happy to send their products to China, whereas it was first, oh no, we're sorry, we're getting it from the U.S. already. Oh, the U.S. is not getting any more? Oh, here's ours. So now the farmers are stuck in the U.S. Who's going to buy their soybeans? And how can you store them? They don't have enough funding to build more stores. And if even that was the case, how long can they be stored and still remain viable and wonderful and so on? But I do believe that the main purpose of tariffs was essentially, our president felt that that was a major source of income for the country, and they didn't have to tap into income tax even higher than what they've already done. Now, if it works, no problem. But the problem is, it has already upset many markets. There are different things that we can't ship products to because of reciprocal tariffs. And whether you're not, you still got to face, like I said, growing grocery prices. Gas prices are going up. Yes, gas prices are going up again. Stagnation of travel, because you don't want to go to places that have been designated as places where they don't like Americans, so you don't want to go there. The key here is this, saints of God. Always understand everything that a process does. There is on the ballot in California, and I'm not going to go too much to that, but just want to make sure I can give you another example. Because of what's happening in Texas, they are going to gerrymander or change certain districts to make them from more Democratic to more Republican. At least 5 of them will actually turn Republican, which is a pretty substantial amount. But they usually do this every 10 years when the census comes, like after 2020, 2030, 2040. They said, no, we're going to do it right now in time for the mid-year or the midterm elections of 2026. They can do that, but it's not what people used to do, and it caught everybody off guard. So now California wants to then do their own version of that, except change more Republican districts into Democratic districts. And that may sound good, yeah, right. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, and I understand all that. But remember when the other party gets in, and the chickens come home to roost. Do you want to be on the side of, well, we did it because they did it. Well, but you messed us up. We're going to penalize you. But I was doing it because they were doing it. That doesn't matter. That's not our state. This is our state. Or do you want to be the one that, well, we're going to lose Texas, but at least California is safe because we have our integrity. Hard choice. Hard choice. But again, I bring in the scripture. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Not just biblical knowledge, but also you have to understand what's going on with the politics of this country. And again, I'm not trying to throw my endorsement behind anyone or anything, just laying out for you, again, but just my thoughts of why I felt our president loves to use the tariff option. You have to, in order to vote for a person, you should know that person. But God bless you. I love you. Thank you for your time. In Jesus' name.